situations using 6 mindsets. What I'd like to do today is to talk to you and offer a very practical way of taking a look at some ways you can use mindsets to be effective. What I'd like to do next is to talk to you about the goals that I am using to make sure that you see that what we're going to be talking about is looking at scanning the environment to be able to boost your strategic thinking, examining 6 mindsets, and to make sure that you use these in a practical way. So let me start by suggesting that leaders must make smart choices. There is an awful lot about leadership that takes a look at leadership style. But what we're going to be taking a look at today is to make sure that leaders make the smart decisions. And these decisions are getting more difficult. It's easy to make the routine decisions, but making the difficult decisions means that we have to actually collect more information than ever before. Now, there's a book out by Daniel Kahneman, who actually won a Nobel Prize for his work, that talks about the shift from fast thinking to slow thinking. And fast thinking is the thinking that we do when we have routine decisions, where we can use our past practices and continue in the same vein. But what he's writing about is the fact that actually the situations that we're confronting now require slower thinking. So instead of jumping into action quickly, take more time to make sure that we're getting all the information necessary. And again, what we've been talking about leadership in the past has really been more about attributes and speaking and charisma and style. But a U.S. leadership guru, Peter Drucker, suggested that effective leadership is not really about being charismatic. It's defined really by being able to deliver results. And what we have in the left of the slide is a picture of Yoda from the Star Wars, and one of his lines was made famous. When Luke Skywalker said, "I'll try," he says, "No, don't try, make sure that you just do." And this is where leadership in these complicated situations becomes really important, because we have to make sure that we can deliver results. Now, the World Economic Forum in January released the list of the 10 most critical skills necessary for jobs in the year 2020. And what you'll see is that 6 of them relate to thinking. Complex problem solving is at the top, but we also have critical thinking, creativity, decision-making, judgment, negotiation, which requires an ability to influence and analyze, and cognitive flexibility. So what we're going to be talking about really is the fact that what we have today is an enemy where we think we know something, and what we really do have is a perception of reality rather than a full grasp of reality. And I'd like to test this out with you. I'd like to ask you, what do you see when you look at this picture? Most people will start off by suggesting that they see a frog. But what we know is that when we turn the picture around, when we look at something differently, what we really see is the head of a horse. Now, if you had responded first with a frog, you were right. If you waited and saw something later that says it was a horse, you're also right. So this is what we're trying to suggest, that leaders sometimes think they can grab onto the first reaction, and it is right, but they don't recognize that they could also wait and have a second reaction that could give them some more input. So what I'm going to suggest to you is that we need to continually scan to understand the current context. And this means that we really have to, because the context of the circumstances, the realities that we're facing, are constantly changing. So if we keep doing what we've always done, we'll get the results that we've always gotten. And the question is that enough? And the picture to the left suggests that too many of us are driving forward by only looking in our rearview mirror. And that can be very dangerous, because looking at the present the past does not always prepare us fully for the future. So what I would like to talk to you about are mindsets. And a mindset is a point of view. It's a frame of reference that we use to collect information. It's what we're going to be focusing on, and it's our mental paradigm. So what we're going to suggest is that mindsets, when we take a look at them, can expand our awareness of the conditions around us. So let's take a look at the 6 mindsets that we should be using in organizations today to make sure that we fully understand our context so that we can make the smart decisions when we confront the difficult problems that we're facing that are precedent-setting, that are complex, that are interwoven, and sometimes there's even ambiguous information that we have to sort through. The first mindset is the inventing mindset. And the inventing mindset says, okay, in this situation, should we be focusing on new breakthrough kinds of state-of-the-art products? Is there a way to leverage new technology? Is there a way to apply research? Are there ways internally that we can work more effectively and create some new synergies? So the inventing mindset is a very creative, innovative, high initiative mindset. But that's not the only mindset. We also have to keep our customers in mind. And the catalyzing mindset says, okay, let me collect information in terms of our customers. Are there new market niches that we could start serving? How do we grow our market share? How can we retain our key customers? And is our staff really motivated and actually very actively trying to make sure that we serve our customers? So one was innovation with inventing. The second is catalyzing. It really a focus on the market. The third mindset is the developing mindset. And this is basically taking not externally at the customers and the market and the competition, but the developing mindset takes a look at building a solid organizational structure. Should we be functionally organized? Should we be regionally organized? Should we be product organized? Should we be matrix organized, networked? How are we working internally to make sure things are going smoothly? This is the mindset that wants to make sure that operations are seamless, that we don't have silos where one unit isn't talking to another when they really need to be. This is the mindset that says, are we clear about who's responsible, who's reports to who? Are we clear about what we expect from people? This is the mindset that says, are our policies and our plans meeting our current goals? Because sometimes some of the policies we have in place were established in the past and now need to be revised to meet our current goals and strategies. And this mindset also is taking a look at how resources meaning people, budget, facilities, equipment, are being allocated. Are they being given to the highest priority projects? Now, once those priority projects are established and the infrastructure is in place, there's another mindset that says, okay, we have a good structure, but how can we improve it? How can we improve our workflow? How can we improve our quality? What can we do to reduce the cost of getting the job done, to improve our profit, our revenue, our ROI? How are we measuring our performance, making sure that we aren't deviating from our plan? And this is also the mindset that sets up very clear performance standards for employees. So the developing mindset says, let's get organized. The performing mindset suggests, let's make the polish the processes that we have to become more effective. The fifth mindset takes a look at the retention issues in terms of retaining the key players in our organization. There usually are individuals that sometimes we take for granted, but they are really key contributors that we want to make sure stay with the organization. This mindset also takes a look at the culture. Do we have a high-performing culture? Do we have a culture that is really willing and able to accept change? Can we introduce change, and will the culture follow us? This mindset also says, who is going to be in the line of succession. I worked with one company, and they told me that 90% of their employees could retire in 5 years, but they had no plan for who was going to be taking their places. That can be very dangerous for an organization. The protecting mindset also says, do we have the skills, the knowledge, the abilities to prepare the organization for the future? And in addition, this mindset says, are our employees engaged and committed? There's really a big difference between people who are doing only what they need to do to get by and those individuals who are actively committed and go above and beyond to make sure that something actually gets accomplished. These are the individuals that aren't working just to do an activity, they're actually working to produce a result. And then the sixth mindset suggests that what we need to do is to keep an eye out for the emerging trends that are hitting our industry, our demographics, our technology. What is happening that we may need to adjust to? Because some of these adjustments take time. So the earlier we identify these trends, the better we will be. The other aspects of the challenging mindset take a look at questioning our existing assumptions and business models. This may not sound like a major need, but I will just suggest in the United States, the banking industry in the 1990s made the assumption that home prices would never go down more than 5%. And of course, that was true for the recent past, but in the long history, of course, they had. And we had a tremendous recession based on the fact that 95% mortgages were granted, and when the recession hit, people could not cope with their mortgages. This mindset says, okay, we're doing well. What new opportunities can we try to capture? This mindset also says, are there partnership or alliances out there that can help us? And this is also a reflective mindset that says, what are we doing within the organization that are the best practices that we want to actually institutionalize across all the organization? So a mindset is taking a look at an area of the organization that is critical to success. But what happens really is that we really can't deal with all six at the same time. We're going to have to make choices about what is most important. And let me just give you an example. Let's suggest that you want to purchase a car. The question would be, what information would you like to collect? What kinds of input will you want to have at your fingertips before you make a decision? And you can use the mindsets for this analysis. The inventing mindset would say, what are the new features of the car? What new technology is there? Is it a stylish car? The catalyzing mindset says, hey, what is the level of customer service that I will receive? The developing mindset is, what is the infrastructure of this organization? Is there a dealer or service facility nearby? And this for me was one that I overlooked when I bought a car. I bought a Peugeot, which was manufactured in France, and when I had a car accident, someone rear-ended me, I didn't realize how long I'd have to wait to get the parts shipped from France. So this was something I overlooked, and it was something I needed to have paid attention to. The performing mindset would say, what is the overall cost to operate? What are the miles per gallon that I could receive from this car? What is the cost of the insurance? Because the insurance does vary by car. So, very practical, mostly quantitative areas that I need to consider. The protecting mindset suggests, what is the warranty? Is it a safe car? Volvo has made their cars almost identified with safety. Another question would be, will it fit where I want to park it? In Japan, parking spaces are very small. I have a colleague who bought a car, drove it home, and found that it would not fit in his garage. So again, a different perspective but one that can be very important. And the challenging mindset would suggest, is purchasing or leasing a better opportunity for me? Is that the best way for me to go? And then the question is, this car meets my needs right now, but will it meet my needs in 4 or 5 years? So what I'd like to suggest to you is that the mindset's a way of collecting information before jumping into a decision when those decisions are complex and the number of variables and factors is extremely numerous. What we've found out is that most individuals can only handle 7 factors at a time. And most of the complex situations are having so many more facets or factors that we really need to get organized in the way we collect information to make sure that we've carefully considered all of the data that we have available. So what I'm suggesting is that a mindset is not a matter of IQ. It is not a personality trait. It is not a leadership style. It is not technical competency. So these questions are very different from, for example, knowing how to do a budget or knowing how to do a hiring decision. What a mindset is a commitment to ask questions and understand all points of view so that we can make the smart decisions based on current conditions. We don't want to be using the rear view mirror and using conditions from the past. So let's test this out. Which line, as you look at line A or line B, which line would you, first reaction, suggest is the longer line? And if you're like most respondents, you would suggest that line B is longer. The perception is that it is bigger. And this is the problem with perception or intuition or the first glance, is that sometimes it's wrong. Our perceptions are very important, but they can be illusions as well as accurate. And with complex decisions, what we really have to do is to make sure that we collect the information. Now, again, we have to fight the tendency to want to make the fast call. And this is part of the old leadership assumptions that leaders really have to have all the answers. You can go to a leader any time, ask him or her a question, and they can immediately give you the right answers. So sometimes speed has been associated with leadership. What's happening in our world today is that the complexity of our decisions, the complexity of the global environment and the fast change pace of technology, demographics, the economy suggest that those fast decisions sometimes can really make a mistake. And so we really need to make sure that we collect the facts before we jump into some of the decisions that can be precedent setting, that are very complex, that are very systems integrated. So the question comes up, what do we need to do this? And what I'd like to present to you is a model that suggests that there are 4 steps in making a very careful analysis of complex and change-oriented situations. The first step is to detect all the facts. What we're going to do is collect all the facts, and we'll discuss that in a moment in terms of what that means. But the second step says, after we collect all those facts, let's explore what our options are given all those facts. And this is a step that we really need to institute in most organizations, because usually what we do is we skip from step 1 to step 3. Or we combine step 2 and step 3, thinking we can be creative and innovative and thinking out of the box and evaluating at the same time. What we really have to do is to make sure that we separate out exploration as a separate step. And then we evaluate it, decide what is the best course of action, and then we can actually plan for the implementation. So let's take a look at each one of these steps in a little bit of detail. Detection suggests that we scan for information using the 6 mindsets, or the buckets of information that are out there that we need to consider before making a fast decision for those complex environments that we confront. The second part of detection is that we need to shift our time horizons. We tend to think mostly in the present. What do I have to do right now? That's a great question, but so is the question, what do we need to do for the future, and what have we learned from the past? So we have to increase the time horizons to past, present, and future. We have to look for patterns and trends. Because, again, if we're making major changes, the more time we have to institute that change, the better. We have to praise individuals who think differently. Now, I want to make sure I'm conveying the fact that even if someone thinks differently and they may not be correct, they may not have the best answer, but the idea of encouraging or thanking people who think differently is an important part to encourage others to feel comfortable in proposing ideas. So we really have to recognize those who are looking at information and collecting it and drawing conclusions a little bit differently than others are. And then we have to look for what are the opportunities, but also what are the risks. One of the things that happens is we tend to be overly optimistic that we can do anything that we really set our mind to doing. And sometimes we ignore the risks or we just discount them, saying they will never happen. So in the detection, we have to look both at the opportunities and the risks. So again, a reminder in terms of the first step of scanning for information, take a look at using the mindset buckets, the inventing, which is number one, the new approaches, products, services, and synergies, the catalyzing, patient satisfaction, client knowledge, brand reputation, the competition, number three, which is developing operational seamlessness and integration so we don't have things break down between different segments of the organization. Number four, the performing, quality, safety, efficiency, and financial return. Number five, the protecting, which takes a look at the culture, the skills, and making sure that we retain those key players within our organization. Number six, checking the assumptions, the lessons learned, and maybe checking for partnerships, which is the challenging. So to use those 6 perspectives to make sure you're collecting information from all the mindsets. So that's when you're collecting the facts. The next step is to step back and say, okay, what can we do with all this information? Let's explore our options. And again, this is really a separate process from the fact collection. It's also a separate process from evaluating whether something will really work. So whether something works is, what would be feasible for us. In the exploration stage, we're not looking at feasibility. What we're looking at is actually what is technically possible. So we need to think outside of the normal constraints. We might even ask, what could we do if we had all the resources necessary? We can conduct a brainstorming session where we ask people to just come up and generate as many ideas as possible, and no one is allowed to evaluate them until later. We could ask for the patterns that we think would be the most effective for our organization. Let me highlight this next bullet. We need to generate multiple alternatives. What usually happens in the exploration stage is 2 ideas come up. One is really very good and one is just sort of so-so. And so people say, we looked at alternatives, we had 2, but one was such a winner and one was such a non-starter that there really wasn't 2 alternatives. So I really would like to make sure that when you do the exploration stage, you look at 3 or 4 alternatives to really make sure that you're looking at all possibilities. Another area for exploration is how can we use new technology? How can we identify new ways to work together more efficiently? What are the systems? Are they aligned? Are they able to talk to each other? Are they integrated? What are some new ways we can work with others? And this might also be a time to relook at what we said in the past we could not do, But right now, with the new realities, maybe we can. So the exploration stage really takes a look at thinking things in a different way. And let's just take a look at an example. I'm going to ask a question, and by the way, questions are key. The more we ask questions, people feel comfortable providing answers. So if I ask the question, what can be done to improve watermelon sales and revenue? It's an interesting question, and you know, you'd think, well, okay, you could expand your geography, you could work with new retailers. But there are also some interesting ideas that would suggest that sometimes we can do things that are really different. We can make sure that we have square watermelons. The advantage of a square watermelon is it's much easier to ship. It also fits in more refrigerators, so it has a different market than we would normally have considered. So the exploration tools suggest like collecting information using the 6 mindsets and then stepping back and defining the blue sky future. Now what I mean by a blue sky future is something that we would never have thought about before. It's an imagination. It's considering, again, no constraints whatsoever. This is the question of if we could do anything we wanted to do, what would we be doing? This is a process of identifying ways to capture opportunities presented by technology. This is an opportunity to check and expand your existing assumptions about what the customers want, what we want, what is possible, what technology will permit, what we can do differently with our vendors. So this is an opportunity to really look at all the alternatives and think in a very creative way about what is possible and what could be a new addition to our mission, what could we be doing, again, differently. So I would, again, try to stress that when we look at complex situations and we want to make sure that we make the smart call, what we really need to do is spend time on the exploration stage, which frequently gets, again, merged with other stages and given very little attention. So just to stress this fact, what I would suggest to you is that we have a humorist in the United States in the past, Mark Twain, suggests, you know, even if you're parked on the right track, you'll get run over if you just stay there. And too many of our organizations come to a point of excellence, and they know that their brand is highly regarded, they know things are going extremely well, and what happens is they tend to stay there. And what I would like to just suggest to you is that that can be very dangerous. What we really need to do is to make sure that we continue moving along the track and making sure that we stay where our world is evolving to rather than where it has been. Now, we're getting to the part where people really enjoy the complex problem-solving aspect, because this is where they get to say, okay, let's evaluate it and find out what is going to be best for us at this point in time. So this is where we take a look at all the possibilities and determine what is really likely, what is feasible, what are the potential risks and ramifications. And this is where we take a look and say, okay, how much will this cost us in time and equipment and people and money to make sure that it really is the best decision for us. This is the stage where we check what are the regulatory compliance issues, what are the tax implications. Let's take a look at the governmental kinds of policies that we will need to comply with. This is a time when we take a look at the gaps in the systems. I mean, we may want to do something, but we may not have either the information system, the facility square footage, or something else that would make that choice a really dangerous choice. This is where we want to test to see what the fit is with our culture. If we're doing something that seems to be a big departure from our tradition, it becomes uncomfortable, And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it, but when we test for the fit with culture, what we really need to do is to make sure that if there isn't a good fit, if it may seem jarring to our culture, what we need to do is to make sure our planning and our ramp-up time gives people an opportunity to adjust. We need to do a better job of planning the implementation with a longer lead time if the culture is not quite ready for this change. We have to check that we have the skills and competencies available. We've got to make sure that if we do this, that it will be a safe environment for both our employees and our customers. And we need to ask the question, what could go wrong? Again, we need to balance our optimism about trying something new with understanding what the real risks are and what are the potential risks. In physics, they suggest that for every action there is a reaction. So we have to ask, what are the reactions, and all those reactions, are they going to be positive? So this is the process of making those decisions, and it's asking us to take a look and see things differently. If you take a look at the slide, you will see that you can first identify the white box to the left, or you could be focusing on the black dots. But the point is, once you see both of them, you'll always see both of them. But at first, our first glance may have picked out one or the others. So if we really want to make sure that we see things differently, we really have to use the mindsets to do that analysis and being willing to check and see the different perceptions that are available to us. So what we then are going to be doing is taking a look at moving forward. Now, a lot of leaders think that their role ends with the decision making. They make an announcement and they think that's the end of my responsibilities. The other folks will make sure things get implemented. With complex problem solving, we really have to spend more time in the planning stage. And what we need to do is to prepare a change management plan. It's interesting to me, and research has validated this over many times, that successfully executing change is very rarely done. The success rate of change has been between 9% and 30%, which means that 70% or more of the change initiatives fail to meet their objectives. And we really need to change those odds. And the way we're going to be able to do that is with effective execution planning. And part of that execution planning is to make sure that we come up with a communication plan. And this communication plan just cannot be a quick summary, tagline, something you could put over and over again, just 4 or 5 words. A communication plan has to be able to be announced throughout the organization, but it also has to let the organization have a two-way discussion. What are their concerns if we go this way? What are the kinds of things that we need to consider? The planning process also means that we have to assign teams. And you know, a team is a wonderful idea, but we have to make sure that we're structuring the teams in an effective way. Is it going to be a problem-solving team, a creative team, a self-managed team, an autonomous team? All of those are structured differently. So what kind of a team, who's on the team, and what are the individual roles? We have to confirm what are the measurements and the milestones. Now, the word milestone is used here purposely because what we're talking about here is the fact that we have to measure our progress within every 6 to 12 weeks. If we're not having these mid-course checkpoints, we don't have the opportunity to see if we're staying on track, and we don't have the opportunity to communicate our progress within the organization. And when we communicate our progress in the organization, we reconfirm people's commitment that things are going well and people can stay excited and continue to support whatever the initiative is that we've announced. We have to analyze the implementation process and make sure that we've considered all of the interrelationships. I know of one organization who came up with a new policy that they were going to announce to an insurance company, but they forgot to tell their call centers who were asking the question about what their new script was to announce this policy. Second, another factor we need to identify the mindsets of our stakeholders. How will they see this? Are we communicating to them? There's a tendency when we make a decision just to only talk about the factors that made that decision important. We sometimes need to be able to communicate how we considered other mindsets and why we chose the project so that people can understand that all aspects were created. And again, the whole process put together is to make sure that we create an execution planning process. What's interesting historically is that most executives, and by the study by Dr. Nutt at Ohio State University in his book, Why Decisions Fail, he found that 80% of decisions are made by executives without considering alternative. And again, this is the reason why we have situations where new initiatives fail, and sometimes organizations make faulty decisions that can hurt them significantly. Here's a quote from the former CEO of McDonald's when he basically was willing to say that he made a mistake, which is a very healthy sign for a leader. He said, "We tried to get bigger." He tried to grow with a catalyzing mindset, when what they should have done is improve their quality, why we should have gotten better, which is the performing mindset. Again, there was a misreading of the conditions. A more current example is the mindset miscalculation made by Volkswagen. Volkswagen decided that they were going to be focusing on being known as a high miles per gallon, low emission car company. And what they did to try to build that reputation was to alter some of the software during emissions testing. And what we have now is the current CEO is saying that that was a major mistake and they really need to reestablish trust within the organization. So what we're suggesting with complex decision making is that we need organizations where people who are contributing to that organization are actually committed to thinking. And this was the original motto of IBM. The most current one is not just think, but outthink. So again, just to bring home the impact of what we mean by thinking, I'd like to ask you to look at the slide and focus on the left-hand portion, the black box with the star, white star and the dot in the middle. I'm going to ask you to just focus on that for about 20 seconds. Just look at that for 20 seconds. Now look at the right-hand box. And if you're like me, when you look at the right-hand box, right around that dot, you'll see a black star. You've carried with you the first impression over to a new situation. And this is the kind of problem that can occur if we continue to rely on our past impressions and the ways things have been done historically very successfully. So what we're talking about with mindsets is not saying what was done in the past was wrong. What we're saying that was probably right for the situations we had at that time. And what we need to do now is to deal with some new reality. And the new reality in the white box is there's just one black dot. So what this suggests for leadership is that thinking in leadership has really changed. In the 21st century, leaders' real role is to ask the right questions. They need to make sure that their staff understands how to ask the questions from all 6 mindsets. This is the situation where the leader can tell their staff how to do the analysis, so when the staff presents the leader with their findings, it's much more accurate, it's much more attuned to current realities. And this is a big shift because in the past what we expected leaders to do was to always be able to have all the answers. So it's a major shift, and it's a shift that's happening because of complex problem solving. So what we can do with the mindsets is actually create a checklist of questions, and this is just a sample. We usually have about 10 per mindset, but the inventing mindset, how can we take our products to new level? What can we do to technology? The challenging mindset, what's the competition doing? Are we retaining and learning from our customers? The developing mindset, what will ensure smooth execution? What will create seamless performance? Some of the performing mindset questions, what are the cost-benefit analysis? How can we reduce costs or improve the speed at which we get our product delivered? The protecting mindset, do we have the skills and staff we need? Are we developing the talent for the future that will match our current strategy? The challenging mindset that takes a look at what are the emerging customer trends? How can new partnerships help us? So these are questions that people can ask. Again, it's not reliant on this person's style. This is just an agreement that you have to use mindsets to deal with our greater complexity today. So the benefits of using mindsets is that we'll make smarter decisions. We'll be able to manage change because we'll be able to present a business case for the change that considers all perspectives. We'll be able to have effective teams that are really committed and aligned because they have a common goal. We'll be able to ensure that execution actually happens. We'll be able to boost commitment. We'll be able to improve support for change and reduce dysfunctional conflict. And it's interesting, this may be culturally biased, but in the United States, research has suggested that in most organizations, conflict consumes 20% of the workforce's time. Now that's a major portion of time. If we can reduce that, we will be able to significantly improve productivity, as well as, again, create a more cohesive culture and work environment. And so what I will suggest to you is when we look at the mindsets on the left, the challenging, inventing, catalyzing, the reds and the yellows, have an interesting common orientation. They believe that rapid change is important, that risk is necessary for reward, so we have to take risk, and that we're looking externally more than we're looking internally. And these three mindsets are the ones that tend to want to introduce change. And again, when we know what the success rate of change is being so low, we sort of say, how does that not happen? And we take a look at the other three mindsets, the developing, the performing, and the protecting, the blues and the greens, and we recognize that there are other mindsets in the organization that suggest that right now what we should be doing is having evolutionary change. We don't want rapid revolutionary change, that we should reduce or mitigate or get rid of risk, and that the primary need is not to look externally and to look internally. So sometimes the three mindsets, if those are the chosen priorities for this point in time, are frustrated by the individuals on the other side that want to be more careful, analytical, and internally focused. And the danger is that these folks on the right-hand side are labeled resistors. They're not resistors. They're the individuals that will make sure that the implementation goes smoothly. So what we're suggesting when we look at the differences when we have different mindset orientations is we have an opportunity to have an objective and discussable topic around why do you think this is the most important thing to do right now? Okay, then what are your goals? These are very easy to have a conversation. And sometimes we can learn of a different set of facts that will help us bridge those differences. And we can bridge these differences. But if we don't have that mindset orientation, what we frequently have in an organization is an attribution when someone says something I don't agree with, or they say something that I think will hurt my unit. I may jump to the conclusion that they have some personal agenda. They have a motivation of some type that is meant to help them and me. And if that continues, I will then start suggesting they have some character, some value, or some ethical issues. But in the lower portion of this pyramid of conflict, we can't discuss these. These are the kinds of things that go on and on and on. And these are the kinds of things that continue to get talked about and not resolved. And so if we can focus on the differences of opinions in the mindset arena, ideas, actions, goals, and results, we'll be able, I think, to cut conflict in half. And saving 10% of an organization's time would be a significant benefit to the organization. And we can bridge differences. The inventing says new products, the performing says I want to optimize, but what they have in common is they want to explore ideas. They want to find the best solution. Catalyzing says take a look at customers, protecting says let's look at employees, but what they have in common is focusing on people and setting expectations on both sides so there'll be a positive and constructive relationship. The developing says let's look internally at coming in with an organization and infrastructure. The challenging is saying, no, let's look at what we need to do differently. But again, what they have in common is taking a look at the big picture and the longer term. So to put it in another way, what happens with mindsets is we take a look and are willing to consider different perspectives. And I think the old analogy of the 6 people looking and feeling an elephant because they're using their touch because they do not have sight. And if someone says, holding a leg, that it's a column, and someone holding the tail says, no, it's a rope, and someone holding the tusk says, no, it's a pipe, and someone holding the trunk says, no, it's a hose. If we have the opportunity to discuss and look at those different perspectives, we can actually make better decisions. What we have is an inventory that has taken a look at mindsets, and we have interesting research that will suggest that leaders, 45% of leaders, are using one mindset at a point in time. This may be actually absolutely effective, but we also need to know that they've chosen this one mindset after looking at all 6. We know that 31% are using 2 mindsets and 22% are using 3 mindsets, which means that 98% of the individuals are using 3 mindsets. And there is a tendency after we start using a mindset to stick with it too long. And we need to keep in mind that we have to look elsewhere. So we're not suggesting, again, what's right or what's wrong in terms of the current choice. It's just that we're saying make sure you're not overlooking something. Make sure you're not being blindsided by current events. This is a wonderful quote because it talks about the fact that really we're not resisting new ideas. We just hate giving up on the old ones. And this is a quote from a gentleman who was a business leader in the past, and he was given the task of getting banks who had been competing with each other to actually work together to create something called a credit card, and this was the Visa credit card. So part of the mindset piece is to help people address their affection, their pride, their loyalty, their tradition with the old, and dealing with that so they can permit that the new ideas are actually coming into the organization, that we are able to take a look at the current conditions without labeling what we did in the past wrong. We're just suggesting that the current reality is requiring us to adapt, to be flexible, to be agile. We have to be resilient as the conditions change. And that is really the key, the ability to accept that the world is changing rapidly and we have to be alert to it. We want to seize the opportunities. We want to try to prevent potential risks. And we want to make sure that the organization is coming along with us. We don't want a we-them kind of sensation within the organization. We really have to adapt to change, by being more comprehensive in our analysis of the organization, the current conditions both internally and externally. And we have to recognize how we can bridge what's happening externally with what's happening internally. Again, we can't just rely on one mindset for too long. We have to adjust. The oldest example that I know of suggests if I'm going to attend a theater, whether that be an opera or a movie, I've paid for my ticket. I enter the theater, I take my seat, I'm committed to watching the movie. But if a fire breaks out, I leave. It has nothing to do with my IQ in a sense, it has nothing to do with my leadership style. It's I've taken a new look at conditions and made a different choice. There's no judgment involved. It's very objective, it's fact-based, it's discussable. And this is where I think that mindsets are a very critical aspect to making sure that we stay together and preparing for the successful, sustainable future. So what I'd like to ask is to say, please consider the mindsets. I want to thank you very much. The book, Brilliant or Blunder, is available digitally or in print. And if you have any comments or questions or feedback, what I'd like to ask you to do is to get in touch with me. And I thank you very, very much for your participation today on the webinar. And I'd like to open it up for some questions and answers.
Dr. Mary, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. Sorry, I had to push you to I was looking at the time because we pressed on time. So folks, we are now open for question and answers. If you have any questions, you could either put it in the question box or you could equally raise your hand. So please. Let me go to the question box. We have a couple of questions already posted. First one. Are mindsets really different from leadership style and competency?
Yes, they are, because what we're asking people to do is just to collect information. And whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, you can collect information. So this is not something that is based on a personal style or the pattern with which you communicate. What we're asking people to do is to be aware of 6 different areas where they have to give some attention, and that's independent of whether you're charismatic or whether you're quiet.
Okay, thank you very much. We have another one. Why is it so hard for leaders to change their mindsets?
I think that what leaders do is they have used a mindset and they've been successful and people have praised them and they've gotten good response. And sometimes they want to be sure that they are doing something that's safe and has been a proven technology. And so we tend to stay with what has worked. But what we also have to realize is the environment is changing, and what has worked in the past will not necessarily work now. And we have examples like BlackBerry, which at one point in time was a very market-dominant PDA kind of technology firm. They stuck with their design when in reality the whole cell phone market was changing. And again, you could understand that they were very proud of what they did, but their inability to see the change has really caused them to be a very minor player these days.
Thank you very much. There's another one. How can mindsets build a change-ready and innovative culture?
Well, what I would suggest is that mindsets, when they're discussed within the organization, bring to everyone's attention that the changes externally and internally that are happening to us are having an impact. And the more people are aware of what the realities are within the organization, the more comfortable they are with change. Because everyone in an organization wants to be continually successful. And we can be aware of the fact that if we aren't making the adaptations to the new realities, we will not be successful. But most organizations just tend to talk about one thing at a time. So people are beginning to question their leaders. So if the leaders in an organization can help people in the organization understand how they're looking at all 6 data points, there's greater confidence that we're going in the right direction. And with that confidence, there's a greater commitment and follow through. So that is important for everybody to feel comfortable with where we're going.
Thank you very much. Another one from Brother Khalid Al-Barsani. The question is, how important this is to your model of managing complex change, especially in the vision part?
Well, I think that's a great question. What happens is most change starts with a vision. And, Stephen Covey talked about, keep the end in mind, but the question is, how do we get the end right? So the starting point for change is the vision, but the question is that vision the right vision? And what the mindsets will do is help us make sure that we collect all the information available in the detections phase, then do the exploration and the evaluation, and then we can come up with a vision that is very feasible, very likely to succeed, and be much more successful than many vision statements are. Too many vision statements are mostly just a clone of what some other company is doing. We need to tailor our vision to our specific organizations. And so getting the vision right is part of collecting the information from all of the 6 mindsets first. We don't want to go into a vision trying to come up with something we want to do, but it is not necessarily in alignment with where our customers are, where the competition is, where the technology is. So the 6 mindsets informs the vision formulation process.
Thank you very much. And we have one last question. You gave examples of the mindset checklist. Where can we find a complete list of questions?
The complete list of questions is in the book, Brilliant or Blunder, 6 Ways Leaders Navigate Uncertainty, Opportunity, and Complexity. And what I would suggest is that the checklist can be tailored to the organization. Sometimes we use the word, what does the customer want? In hospital setting, we would want to change that to what does the patient want? So you can take the 11 questions for each mindset, but you can tailor it for the organization. And actually that's a wonderful team building exercise, is to present them with the checklist in the book and then say, what do we need to do to make this relevant for our team and our organization? And that helps people feel like they own the checklist. It helps them to feel more comfortable with it, and it becomes a tool that they will then use.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Mary. That really brings us towards the end of the webinar. Any concluding remarks that you would like to give before we dismiss out?
I just would like to remind people that when we make a change, it doesn't label what we did in the past as wrong. What we're trying to do is to make sure that we stay alert and able to deal with the changing world that we're facing. And the pace of our change is coming so fast that we have to be willing to ask the right questions, and we have to be willing to let go sometimes of what we've done in the past to make sure that we have a sustainable organization for the long term.
Well, thank you very much, and I really want to thank you on behalf of the Madinah Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship for your valuable time and your willingness to share this live webinar through our platform. So thank you very much, Dr. Mary, and thank you all of those who participated in this webinar. We are recording it. Please stay tuned to webinar.mile.org to learn about our upcoming programs and equally to access the webinar archives. With that note, we'd like to
thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And with that note, we'd like to end this webinar, so you all will be automatically dismissed out. You all have a good day, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're calling from. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.